Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. You're watching Trust Television, reaching you here from our headquarters. My name is Ayuelia.
And I'm Zainab Bala. Thank you so much for joining us this beautiful morning. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. How was your weekend, Ayuba?
Well, had a great weekend. I tried to have a good time. Yeah, with the family and friends and all of that. But while I was doing that, I was also thinking about today, Monday morning. Mondays are usually days that people dread, especially in late Sunday nights. You start thinking, okay, what's going to happen on Monday and all of that. That's because it's the day that starts you off, for the whole week.
Right.
So quite a lot, really, to look at and to do in this week. A lot of things. We are approaching the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. That's coming on Saturday.
Right.
No, Friday.
Friday, rather.
Yes, Friday.
But,
and so we are making plans towards that. And then quite a lot also that we'll be looking at today. Today on the show, we'll be looking at high food import bill amid huge investment in agriculture. A report by the Central Bank of Nigeria revealed a whole lot, that the Central Bank released quite a lot of money, but we are still talking about food inflation in the country. So that will be our focus today on the program. And then, as usual, we'll be taking a look at the stories that made the headlines on our newspapers.
Well, before that, let's take a look at the news highlights. Now, I'll begin with operatives of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, in Edo State have arrested 76-year-old grandfather Osagi Robert and a suspected fake security agent Godwin Elubari, popularly known as Edwin Agbon, for importing drug chocolates and cookies from Canada into Nigeria to sell. Now, the operatives arrested the septuagenarian, popularly called also Gen Ego Oredo area of the state, for dealing in cannabis, while Godwin arrested during a controlled delivery of a consignment shipped into Nigeria through a courier company. The consignment, which emanated from Canada, contains Colorado brand of cannabis concealed inside chocolates and cookies weighing 6.491 kilograms, while the drug cookies and chocolates weighed 5.566 kg and 0.383 kg respectively. In a related development, the operatives also arrested a 48-year-old Oloduba Augustine who arrived Enugu Airport from Sao Paulo, Brazil, via Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on New Year Eve, and while placed on observation, he confessed to have swallowed 58 pellets of cocaine, out of which he excreted 48 pellets, delivered to a Kenyan while on transit in Addis Ababa for a fee of 1 million.
Now, federal government says the country's 2050 long-term low emission vision document is a demonstration of its commitment to playing a leading role in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. The Minister of State for Environment, Sharon Ikezo, stated this on Sunday following the formal publication of Nigeria's long-term vision document by the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention for Climate Change. Ikezo told journalists that the document is an important landmark for the actualization of Nigeria's quest for mitigating the negative effects of climate change and a roadmap to meeting its decarbonation targets. Now, she recalled that a key part of the Paris Agreement is the invitation to parties to formulate and communicate by 2020 long-term greenhouse gas emission development strategies, adding that the next step is the development of the long-term low-emission development strategy, which will develop scenarios and models that helps to translate the vision document into quantified emission reduction targets together with technology options and cost implications.
Now, elsewhere, Maiduguri tricycle riders express happiness over the newly constructed flyover in the capital city. The infrastructure situated at the old customs roundabout is the first of its kind in Borno State. The tricycle rider loved to ply the structure at night. The report.
Because of the market, Hawk lies this road often for his daily survival. He said it was difficult to find a parking space and always experience heavy traffic before the flyover came to be.
Everyone knows that. Even during the rainy season, the road was very bad, but now we don't experience that when moving around. But the only problem we have is we want Botma to create a bus stop for us.
And at night, it looks radiant with street lights and other colorful lights. Some residents find it eye-catching, describing it as one of the beautiful sights and serving its purpose of reducing congestion.
You get to see tricycles blocking the road, people blocking each other, you know. So at the end of the day, you discover that people spend hours on the spot. I'm happy that the governor has been able to complete this project.
I used to pass this area much crowded because it would take me more than 30 minutes university, but now it's not much up to 10 minutes. Yes.
Now has turned this place to London. The place is so beautiful. We experience any challenges. We are making progress, but we are pleading that a parking space be created for the Keke Napep.
The custom flyover links 4 different locations in the heart of Maiduguri. Residents say they expect to see more similar.
Now, the federal government has recorded a revenue shortfall of 1.93 trillion naira in a period of 11 months. Data from the Budget Office in a document containing an overview of the 2020 budget implementation said the federal government's aggregate revenue projection in the 2021 Appropriation Act and supplementary budget is 8.13 trillion naira. According to the document, 7.4 trillion naira is in the budget for January to November 2021, but the government generated only 5.51 trillion naira in the period, resulting in a shortfall of 1.93 trillion naira. The government has a track record of failing to achieve its revenue projections as it grapples with revenue challenges. All right, now let's take a look at the events of the 10th of January in world history. Please stay with us.
Quite a number of historical events, that happened on the 10th of January. Now, in 1946, the first General Assembly of the United Nations opens. 51 nations were represented on that day. Quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you remember back in the days, the world was grappling with the issues of wars, between countries. We had the World War I, the World War II, and all of that. And so leaders at different levels and different countries began to think about, how can we deal with these issues of world wars? And then they decided that, look, let's have League of Nations and let's have countries come together, basically, to talk, rather than, engage in fights and all of that. And so this, saw the evolution from League of Nations, and now we're talking about United Nations. And, we have a lot of countries now, under the United Nations. Yeah. And over the years, we've seen how they have intervened in conflict, in different parts of the world, and also how they have also played that humanitarian role. You have, you know, I mean, I would say contributions from the United Nations to crisis-prone areas, you know, where they provide food and all of that. So I think it's a major game changer for our world. I just hope that United Nations will, you know, there's a whole lot of politics as well. You know.
Yeah, that too. You know, a lot of conversation about the politics in the United Nations General Assembly. But we do really hope that that is given less priority and more priority given to the sole purpose of which the whole General Assembly was focused for.
And I'm looking forward to more African countries having, you know, some kind of say, you know, in the activities of the United Nations, especially as it regards the Security Council, you know, of the United Nations. There's this long-standing debate and advocacy for having at least one or two African countries, you know, as permanent members, or I would say rather, Africa should have a permanent seat, you know, at the United Nations Security Council. And that's very important, especially if you look at the fact that recent conflicts, you know, you have more of them in Africa.
Right.
And so how do you take decisions on behalf of the people that are not there?
They need to be part of that decision-making
so
process.
It's very, very important. Now, that's that for today in history. Quite a number of other things there. You'd see in 1863, London Underground opens. The Tube is the world's oldest underground railway. I look forward to us having that.
I really do hope so.
If you look at 1863 till date, this is 2021. We don't have a single underground train, I don't know, train line. Well, we are really far behind, and I hope that we do better. The one on the tracks, on
already
the
struggling, you know, with that one already.
Main roads, you know, on the surface of the earth rather, we are still struggling with that. You know, not to even talk about underground. So we have a long way to go, really. 1776, you have Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense. It was a pamphlet that argued for freedom from British rule, and it helped spark the American Revolutionary War. So these are significant records in our history that we should also always bear in mind. Now, let's take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. Now, this time around, the dailies will talk to you about what's happening today.
Right. What are the stories making headway on our newspapers this morning?
But in a situation where you find that they look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that.
All right, let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, and that will be the first we'll be looking at. The lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper talks about MD's suspension. NPA panel, mom, 8 months after. So recall that committee was set up to investigate the MD of NPA, Zainab Bala, over allegations, Hadiza Bala rather. For real. Wow, Zainab Bala seemed to stick to my lips. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm talking about Hadiza Bala, and 8 months down the line, we haven't seen much, you know, come out from that. There's no report yet. Now the committee may work till 2023. That's according to Amechi, the Minister of Transport. And then the next one right there says unstable leadership affecting agencies' productivity. That's experts saying. We can't say anything now. It's Hadiza Bala, her aide, is saying. Now it's politics at play. That's according to stakeholders. So you'd see also an infograph of all the events, you know, leading to her suspension until date, and also the terms of reference of all the committee members. So you might want to grab a copy of the Daily Trust newspaper to have the full details about this story. Below that, you see inside PDP's 6-year battle in opposition. You would find the details of that story on page 39 of the Daily Trust today. And then you also have how son hired assassin for 110,000 to kill father in Niger.
My goodness.
That's quite sad, really.
Sorry.
After 2-day prayer session, Tijaniya leaders hold lecture in Kano. And then you find also the next story there says 3 officers die as police van crashes in Abuja. So these are stories on the front page of Daily Trust today.
Okay, let's take a look at all the stories on the Blueprint newspaper this morning. The lead story there, Matawale on Zamfara massacre. Political bandits, yellow journalism threatening my government. Quite interesting. And the Riders Day orders reconstruction of villages destroyed by bandits. Yeri-led APC emirs lament killings. Khan slams federal government. You'd also see gunmen kill Benue monarch in his sleep. That's quite very tragic. You'll find the details of that story on page 6 and page 9 of the Blueprint newspaper. Now, other stories, supporting Southeast presidency will be Buhari's greatest legacy. This is according to Okechukwu. Commends PDP for clarification on zoning. Olubadan, kingmakers meet Tuesday on 14-day ultimatum. Osun chief, 8 others in trouble over possession of human parts. That's quite controversial. You find the details of that story on page 13 on the Blueprint newspaper. Ogun, 38-year-old man stabs mistress, husband to death. I saw that story trending on social media everywhere. You'd also see the details of that story on page 20. And then furore as Garki natives reject installation of traditional ruler. Nigerians pay 565.2 billion for electricity in Q3 of 2021. Federal government's new excise tax will cripple beverage subsector. Nigeria Labour Congress warns. And you'd also see CBN disperses 363 billion to household SMEs under targeted credit facility. Senate tackles BP over 14.7 billion hidden PHCN privatization proceeds. BP faults audited accounts. You'd also see my prison experience ordained by God. That's according to former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and you'd find the details of that story on page 20 on the Blueprint newspaper. These are some of the major stories on the Blueprint.
All right, take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The lead story talks about 1 year after FG's auto gas plan fails to fly ahead of subsidy removal. You'll also see the lead, what do you call it now? The riders there says, planned 1 million gas-powered vehicles elusive as subsidy removal looms. The next one, major independent marketers desert scheme as auto gas sells for 400 naira per litre. FG sets aside 250 billion naira for vehicle conversion to begin pilot scheme in 12 states. And then you see also other stories beside the big picture there. Says 1.23 million telecoms subscribers join network as internet growth slows. On page 5, military squandered $15 billion on arms deals. That's CDD claiming. You would also see the next story there says, suit crisis. Wike makes broadcast, declares 19 illegal refineries, kingpins wanted. And then you would also see the next one, Senate unearths 14.7 billion naira PHCN money hidden in banks. The big picture shows you the dance at the opening ceremony of the Africa Cup of Nations 2021 football tournament at State in Yaoundé, Cameroon there. And then below that, you see Tinubu informs Buhari Osinbajo of 2023 presidential ambition. And that's according to a source. Well, the conversation is getting louder.
Hot, right.
Yes. All right. Well, these are the stories that made headlines on the front page of The Guardian.
Okay, let's take a look at other stories on the Punch newspaper. The lead story there: enforce compulsory vaccination for local government, state workers, federal government tells governors. And the riders, National Primary Health Care Development Agency urges states to set up mass vaccination sites in markets. Others, vaccination grounds at 4.2%, 38 deaths recorded first week of January. You see other stories. Grandpa, Brazil returnee, undergraduate arrested with cocaine, tramadol, cannabis. I removed my second testicle to kill sexual urge. UI 500 level medicine dropout. So that's quite very... You see the details of that story on page 13 of the Punch newspaper. Commercial bus driver stabs lover's husband to death in Upun. Akeredolu vows to end herdsmen attacks in Ondo. You'd also see other stories. Federal government excessive borrowing from CBN threatens exchange rates. Others, that's according to a report. Senate probes 14.7 billion PHCN privatization fund in secret accounts. Capital importation falls by 1.68 trillion, says CBN. You'd also see on page 2, federal government issues Lassa fever alert. Death toll hits 102, cases now over 4,000. Wow, that's quite huge. Okay, these are some of the major stories on the Punch newspaper this morning.
Well, all right. Well, quite interesting. With the last one that you read, one of the stories that you read of the Punch newspaper comes to me with some kind of mixed reaction. The one saying that he removed his testicles to kill sexual urge. I'm just thinking how, and this is a medical student, right, at 500 level who dropped out. So maybe if we may just take a glance at that story, because I'm really curious. He says, 44-year-old Teheman Anongo, who dropped out of the University of Ibadan as a 500 level medical student, says he castrated his second testicles. Now, according to the Punch, the story of Anongo, who became a cat pusher after dropping out of school and removed one of his testicles, several people, including his classmates at UI, supported him after the report. Now, on why he removed the testicles, he had said that, well, let me quote him now. He says, "You know how the issue of sexual urge torments one when you don't have a wife, coupled with your religious beliefs. I am someone deeply involved in a religion, and I read about Origen Adamantius, one of the early church leaders from Egypt, who paid to be castrated so that he will not be bothered by sexual urge." Why?
My goodness.
I mean, why? Speaking with our correspondent on the according to the Punch newspaper now, he said he did that, and he has no, he just don't want to be disturbed, you know, and all of that.
This is very absurd.
I think
when you look at it.
I'm feeling like there's some kind of mental health issue
Exactly.
here.
I was about to actually say that. He sounded a bit deviated, if I may say so.
And I'm really wondering whether he got advice from his religious leaders, you know, who who he said, you know, he wants to be a devoted, you know, Christian, so to say, and so you castrate yourself.
But is that really the way to go about being a devoted Christian?
I'm sure that's not the way to go about it, because the truth is, okay, you have castrated yourself, right, so that you be a devoted Christian. And what happens to other issues that you are grappling with? I mean, hatred, issues of envy, issues of lies. You know, these are, yeah, these are all sinful acts, you know. So what happens? Those are things that happens in your mind. So are you now going to kill yourself?
Kill yourself,
or
exactly.
maybe remove your brain, you know, and stop it from thinking?
No, this is really absurd, and no.
I think that people need to understand, you know, religion and the tenets thereof, you know, for them to be able to, you know, serve God the way God should be served. But that's just on one side. And let's take a look at other interesting stories. This morning we are seeing that the Daily Trust newspaper leading with the story of the suspension of Hadiza Bala, the former MD of the Nigerian Ports Authority, NPA. And it's surprising really to know that after 8 months, no report as far as that is concerned, that investigation you know, is concerned. And the minister is saying that the committee will work till 2023. What does that mean? Which committee works for more than 3 years? I mean, this suspension happened, okay, yeah, let's just say 2 years. Okay, so 2 years. In 2023, this issue will be about 2 years.
Right.
And so the committee will continue
To work.
with their investigation
You know,
till 2023.
You know, some actually say it's more political than what we are actually seeing from the outside. But, you know, the issue of politics, you know, interfering in some of these Nigerian agencies, and it's really crippling the way these agencies should actually function.
Yeah, and actually demoralizing, because you find that sometimes you find people who are actually passionate about Nigeria and making things work.
Right.
You know, so they are appointed, they get the opportunity to work, and then they try to do their bit and to make sure that things work the way that they should. And then politics, you know, they get engulfed into politics and all of that. And that's a major issue. We should be able to, you know, define the lines and say, okay, this is where politics stops, and this is where we need to be up and doing in the interest of the people.
You know, in the case of Hadiza, I am really glad that quite a lot of people appraised her well, because people said she was actually doing well, but circumstances crippled in and she was suspended. And up till date, we've not really heard what's up with the whole committee and all of that.
Yeah. All right, now let's take a look at also another story of interest. On the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, on page 35, you would find a story that talks about a son hiring assassins, you know, for 110,000 to kill his father in Niger.
No. Not again. Are we really hungry, or have our morals really gone down the drain? I really don't know what's happening. I don't know.
It's a crazy world, Z. It's a crazy world. People do all kinds of things. This was exactly how we heard some time ago about a couple that sold their child.
A baby.
For 50,000 naira.
50,000.
I mean, how desperate can one really get, you know, to begin to think of things like that and to do things like that? It's really sad. The life of a human being cannot be bought. I mean, you didn't give that life, so why are you selling it? You know, so it's really crazy, terrible. You know, when you see such stories. So if you're curious, just like me, maybe you should pick a copy of the Daily Trust and have a glance, you know, at that story. It's on page 35. Also, you have other very, very interesting stories here, but we'll take a look at some more, but shortly after this break. Please stay with us.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. Now let's take a look at other stories on the Nation newspaper this morning. The lead story there, NLC mobilizes for protest against hike in petrol price. The riders' action plan for January 27th, and then the TUC takes decision electricity tariffs January 20th. You know, as I just saw this, in my mind, I'm saying, please do not hike petrol price, because already people are already struggling with the one we're having right now.
I mean, when you do that, what do you expect? Even though government is saying that, look, we are making plans to, cushion the effects of removing the subsidy and the consequent increase in the price, of the fuel. But again, if you think about these solutions that the government is proposing, is it sustainable? That's one of the things that experts are saying, that look, these solutions are really not sustainable. If you say you want to share fuel subsidy, what do they call it now? That word that has become a buzzword in this recent times, since the COVID-19 came. Palliative,
palliative.
Fuel subsidy palliative, we've heard that. And it's more like the cost, how much, is going to cost government to do that palliative stuff is, more than double, what the government is actually spending on the subsidy. So what's the point? Analysts are of the opinion that maybe we should think about setting up refineries, our own refineries, get them to work, before taking such decisions. That way the impact is not going to be much on Nigerians. Now, another one closely related to this is the story on the Guardian newspaper this morning that talks about the FG's auto gas plan that failed to fly ahead of the subsidy removal. Now, recall that about more than 1 year ago, the government said that, look, they are going to begin to make gas more available. On the contrary, actually, we've even seen the cost of gas
hike
over the past 1 year.
Very alarming.
So again, what are we talking about? Auto gas. If you look at the riders, it says, for instance, the planned 1 million gas-powered vehicles elusive as subsidy removal looms. Now, the major independent marketers desert scheme as autogas sells for 400 naira per litre. Now, FG set aside 250 billion naira for vehicle conversion to begin pilot scheme in 12 states. So, where are we? Well, your guess is as good as mine. We are nowhere as far as that is concerned. And so, when you begin to come up with policies like, the removal of fuel subsidy, it definitely means more difficulty for Nigerians. We know how fuel affects virtually every part of our economic life in this country. Once you have an increase in the cost of in the price of fuel, every other thing goes up. Every other thing goes up, because you have to think about the tomato seller in the market, how she has to move that tomato from the market, to her selling point. And also, if you talk about people selling sugar cane, or whether keke napep riders, I mean, these are the people at the very base of our economy. These are the people that get things going. And so if they cannot access fuel, at a much cheaper price, then it means that ordinary Nigerians will have to pay, more. And that's disaster, because if you look at the income is not increasing. If anything, we are seeing more, the decline. And in fact, unemployment itself is on the rise, and all of that. So these are things that need to be considered. It's going to be more difficulty for Nigerians if we go ahead, and the NLC seem to be ready, for a show.
I really think they should hold this true, because we like to talk about we're going to hold protests, or strikes, and then at the end of the day, somewhere, somehow, you get to hear, oh, okay, we're drawing back and all of that. I really hope that they hold this through, and this really helps, cushion all of the effects that we're going to see in the long run.
Focus should be on getting the refineries to work. I mean, these promises have been made decades ago, and till today, we're still talking about the same thing. what is stopping Nigeria's refineries from working? We always talk about the Dangote refinery coming on stream, but hey, is Dangote refinery the only refinery that we're going to be, relying on in Nigeria? I know that that's going to have an impact, definitely, on our economy, but again, we need to have options, isn't it? We do not want to have, let's not have a monopolistic situation, here, because when you do that, it seems to me that we'll still remain in the woods, so we need to look into doing that. Well, this is how far we can go on our newspaper headlines for today. Reviewer is unable to join us for the show today. Now, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll be taking a look at other discussions, economic discussions on the program, talking about the investment made so far as agriculture and food is concerned in terms of importation, and how much we're dealing with in terms of food inflation. Please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, thank you for staying with us. This is Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. Now, beginning with our first discussion today, in the midst of huge investment in agriculture, the federal government said it spent $1.68 billion on food importation between January and September in 2021. Recall, $1.68 billion. Now, this was contained in a Central Bank of Nigeria report on sectoral utilization of foreign exchange for the third quarter of last year. According to the Apex Bank report, the government spent $163.60 million, $197.73 million, and $171.9 $0.05 million in January, February, and March, while the $156.30 million, $135.72 million, and $213.58 million were spent in April, May, and June by the government. Now, the report also revealed that $184.69 million, $188.88 million, and also $271.59 million were spent in July, August, and September last year. Now, a development economist, Dr. Ibrahim Bello, joins us in the studio. He is also the principal partner, CEO, PVG Consult Limited, and he is going to be giving us perspectives on this. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome to the program.
Well, quite interesting looking at this trade between Nigeria and other countries in terms of importation of food. One would think that by now we should have gone past this stage. This is quite huge. $1.68 billion are spent, yet we see the cost of food on the rise in the country. Give us a sense of the correlation there.
It's a huge figure, really, to have gone down on the sector of importation. But this is not unique to Nigeria. It's more of an African issue. The developing countries in the world have become more of a dumping ground of importation of food. There are a lot of factors that together culminate to, pinning Nigeria specifically to be more of import dependent on food. Now, what type of food are we importing? What sectors dominates the importation? If you look at the statistics, the class of people or sector, like I said, that majorly import are not the people that are classified as the masses. They are the end users of the imported products. What do we import? Cereals, such as maize, sorghums, herbs, barleys, and the rest of them. Soybean, poultry products, dairy products, meats, etc. Now, the bulk of those imported food products, some goes to the manufacturing sector, wheat, for instance. Some are ready-made products that goes directly to the market, like the canned food products. And some complement our food production deficits. So overall, there are justification to some extent, and there are more of reasons not to justify the importation. It's all about policy and discipline in implementation of policies and resource allocation and utilization.
One will say that we've seen huge investments in the agricultural sector in Nigeria in recent times, especially under this government, under this current administration. A lot of money, doled out to farmers. The Anchor Borrowers program, for instance, monies have been, given out in trillions, to farmers and all of that. And we're still having this conversation. What is missing?
If you look at the Anchor Borrowers scheme, is a good example. Now, before the government came out with the Anchor Borrowers scheme, Nigeria's total rice importation is almost 90 or so percent. I don't have the specific statistics. But today, give and take, that gap has been reduced. We're not there yet, but a significant progress has been made in the area of rice production locally. But the problem there is, you are talking of production, yes, but what about the rice seedlings? Do we produce the seeds? because you need the seed to produce the rice. The bulk of our seedlings are imported. I doubt if we have the capacity to produce local seeds up to 70% of our needs in terms of self-sufficiency in rice production. So it's just like the renewable energy sector. When you say you are producing a compliant car, but the product that is used in producing the batteries is creating another climate issue. So it's more of robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of scenario. So in the rice sector, the government should invest, to me, more on seedlings, local capacity to, boost seedlings production. Because if you're not in control of the production of the basic raw material that, pushes you forward, you are getting yourself into another vicious cycle. Fine, you produce the rice, but you don't produce the seeds. So you'll have to import the seeds. It doesn't make sense. It's just like the petroleum. You export the crude and bring in the refined products.
Okay. Now, with all of these challenges outlined, where would you say Nigeria is with achieving food sufficiency?
Food sufficiency, it's something that is not, as easy as it is said. Because, let me give you a scenario. The past 2 years have been, globally, we have been faced with a huge challenge of COVID-19. Now, how has it impacted the entire global economy? Agriculture being one of the major. In Nigeria, there are the factors affecting us as a country. It's not only unique to our local challenges. Global trends impact on our own processes. You are talking of policy, funding, execution, supervision, monitoring, and other things that goes into the production chain. Now, corruption and lack of political will and sheer indiscipline and our problem of, patriotism as a people. Because a lot of Nigerians are not patriotic. People find themselves in positions of power or influence. And the first thing they think of is how to either enrich themselves or apply emotion and sentiment in their decision-making processes. Now, when you bring those to bear, it cripples every positive policy or system the government tries to implement towards the betterment of the country at large. So, food sufficiency is attainable, but the factors that you put in place to get there is what we have to look at. Like I said, from policy down. Now, take an average farmer who has maybe 2 hectares. He wants to cultivate cereals. The first thing there is how to tilt the farm. Does he have the capacity, tractors and other implements that he needs? He needs seeds. Like I said, do we have the capacity locally to produce enough seeds to, feed the farmers that are both locally and the mechanized ones? Then you look at pesticides, insecticides, and other chemicals that goes into making sure that his crops grows properly. We import almost 80, or I don't have statistics like I said, but we import the larger part of those, agri-basic implements and chemicals. Then you look at storage of those, then the impact of the dollarization of our economy on the system. Then transport. If you take it out of the farm, you have to take it somewhere. So there are many sectors of the economy that affects food production.
All right, now, well, this is where we are in 2022. Recently, the president, granted an interview and he spoke quite a lot. And one of the issues that he talked about is the fact that we have only 2.5% of Nigeria's arable land being cultivated. Yet we have a huge number of people unemployed, and all of that. How much time do we have? I mean, are we just realizing that now? And what can we do to maximize, these potentials, that we have?
It's a very small percentage compared to the vast fertile land we have and relative to our population. I believe Nigeria has enough land to cultivate food to not only feed Africa, but also play a role in the global food chain. But again, what are the impediments that are standing on the way of Nigerians towards achieving food sufficiency? It's the same factors we said. You see, in all sincerity, whatever policy and goodwill the government will put in place, there are certain key things that needs to be done. Like I said, we need to take out emotion, sentiment, and selfish interest in our decision-making processes. This is the genesis of most of our challenges. The president may have a good, vision towards a particular sector of the economy. He is very passionate about agric. It's one of his key areas where he intends to make a huge impact. But the drivers of the policy, do they have the same commitment as the president? Those implementing those policies, are they patriotic enough?
But some will say that these people answer to the president. That's why he's the president. He has all the powers to sack whoever does not show enough commitment.
I agree. Like I said, Nigeria's bureaucracy is very huge. The government is doing its best, no doubt about it. But, example, you have now, presently, people will blame insecurity on having an impact on our food production. But before insecurity, we are still grappling with food production. Insecurity is just a factor that came in between, at the middle. So if you take away insecurity today, we're still going to fall back to the same problem. Availability of fertilizer. Because what are the impediments? It's the same problem. Availability of fertilizer, affordable. Availability of farm implements, affordable. Availability of affordable, chemicals to treat the farm, the crops against pesticide, pest and other things. Transport problems, storage problems. It's the same thing we will continue to outline over and over and over again. Now, the government pushes out billions every year towards the provision of this, to make sure that subsidizing fertilizer, importation of tractors and giving it at subsidy, importation of seeds, sometimes giving it free. You understand? Now, the process of approving, releasing, implementing, and getting it to the basics, to those who actually uses this as end users, that is the chain. That is where the problem is. Now, the president needs to put his feet down and, more sense of discipline and enforcement of performance indices.
Which is why some people are having the feeling that maybe because the president is not really, monitoring as he should, maybe that's why we're not seeing results in some of the beautiful policies, that have been
I don't want to look at it in that manner. You see, it's the system is more complicated. Sometimes it's easy to look at it from the spectator's angle. But when you are in government, it's quite different. Nigeria is a very complicated, diverse, country. One of the major challenges we have as a people, I will keep on saying this, is our, we have lost our sense of patriotism as a people. Let me give you a scenario. An average Nigerian today driving on the road, what do you think is the percentage, 1 to 10, that likely beats traffic?
Quite
so
a number.
8 in 10 will beat the traffic.
Jumping the queue in filling station, in banks. Now, the sense of indiscipline, we as individuals, display, goes to show you the level of problems the leadership is having. It's an individual problem. Is the president going to fire the entire civil service? Is he going to fire everybody down the line? The next set of people he brings in, would they not behave the same way? So it's more complicated than we are looking at it, because Nigeria's problem is not only a government problem, but it's an individual, personal problem, because we've lost our sense of patriotism. Most people, rather than to do things when they find themselves in position the right way without being told to do it, prefer to create more incentives for corruption by, the agric officer who is supposed to make sure that fertilizers that are subsidized goes to the farmers, who is at the local government level, for instance. That, you see, is not the responsibility of the president. If you ask an average young person today on the street, what is the difference between trunk A, trunk B, and trunk C roads? Some of them don't know. Most of them, in fact, don't know. Now, if the road behind his house has an issue, he calls the president, because he doesn't know that that road belongs or is the responsibility of the local authority or the state authority. If there is not enough information to sensitize Nigerians to know the levels of intervention of various tiers of government. Now, if the responsibility of the president is to approve, let's say, 400 billion, remember, the end users of that 400 billion are at the local government level. And once the disbursement gets to the state, it is at a point the responsibility of the president and his authority over those funds reduces by more than 70%, because states now takes more responsibility, because they are now in custody of those funds. Now, how they disburse it to the local authorities who are going to now ensure delivery, again, reduces the influence of the president along the chain. So you have to look at the tiers of government and the protocols by law on how some of these funds are disbursed, how they are utilized, at what sectors they are utilized, and who takes responsibility, whose job it is, and does the president have responsibility over that person? If each state is supposed to be given, let's say, 50 billion, and that 50 billion gets to the state governor, the president loses out at that point, because the governor is not answerable to the president. What the president can do is to lobby and continue talking. He cannot arrest the governor. He cannot fire the governor. It now depends on the governor's will to be patriotic enough to make sure the mechanisms at his state takes responsibility in disbursing.
Okay. Now let's talk about genetically modified foods. How does genetically modified foods actually contribute to achieving food sufficiency?
Genetically modified foods, otherwise known as GMO, it's a concept developed by science, because they have projected that in 50 years' time or so, the population of the world will outgrow our food production capacity. Now, if you look at what is happening today, desertification, ecological problems, natural disaster problems, wars, and other varied, problems are reducing the capacity of the world to produce enough food. Africa, we are lucky to a larger extent, but the story is not quite the same with other parts of the world. So the projection is there's a time they are afraid that the world may face severe food shortage. So what will be the stopgap? Now breeds the idea of now going to the lab to temper with, or to modify, so to say, the capacity of, let's say, a stock that is producing 1 stock of maize to produce 10. You are increasing the yield capacity of foods using scientific methods. Now, what they should be able to do, it's a good concept, but the fear most people have is, what impact does it have on the health of people that are going to be, consuming those products? Is there enough statistics to prove safety of long-term use of GMOs or genetically modified foods? So there are some questions that needs to be made available to the public to put in more confidence on people in order for them to accept GMOs. But right now, it's more of a health challenge. People are afraid and skeptical about taking it.
All right. Now, let's look at local solutions to some of these problems. Earlier, you talked about, farm inputs, and access to that, how it's a problem, for our farmers and all of that. Fertilizer, equipment for mechanized farming, tractors and the likes. Are we looking into local solution in terms of investing, in the production of some of these things, and how much have we done?
That is why the president is, putting a lot of energy and funding into agriculture. Now, what I will advise the government to do is to invest more on research. You see, research is the backbone of development. The America, the Chinese, and the superpowers today are where they are because they heavily fund research. Now, the problem is, in this part of the world, we are used to, the fire brigade quick method approach. We want to put 1 billion today and get the result by Wednesday next week. Research doesn't go that way. It takes years because you are trying to prove an idea or to convert an idea into reality using scientific methods. You cannot just wake up and produce seeds. It's a research process that takes about 10, 15, 20 years. When will we start is the problem. And how committed are we going to be on them? We have a lot of, research that have been going on locally. We have different varieties of seeds that are being produced locally. But are they being encouraged? There are money bags that have exerted monopoly on the system to, downplay the efforts of government. So the government should do more in checking such interest to make sure that locally researched products in terms of inputs are brought to bear on the system. And then, we have intellectuals at the lower level whom have come up with innovative way of supporting agric mechanization and food production. It's going to be a lot of work, but the government have to be more committed in balancing the system between vested interest and public interest. These are the problems. Vested interest is more weighing down
the impact
of government, investment towards agriculture, and is impacting on public interest.
In any ways, how do we deal with this vested interest? In most cases, you see that These are politically high-profile persons, and so to get things done, really, you have to do away with this. And it's becoming almost impossible to navigate the politics, around, our economy, in this sense. So how do we deal with that?
It takes a lot of political will to do that. Again, the issue of patriotism comes in. Because if you are a leader today, you will face a lot of challenges. But when you remain persistent and committed to delivering value, you will have to find a way to sit with these people, educate them, and bring them back to speed. There are more ways you can get them engaged. For example, they can fund research. This GMO thing we are talking about is funded by private sector. It's not a government, largely not a government-funded activity. It is the same vested interest somewhere that came together and funded that, processes. It depends on how the government relates with them. If you bring them closer and discuss with them and task them as a government to deliver on certain sectors, most of the times they do, because they have the capacity to do it. But when you allow them to go on their own and define their space, then you get on, collusion with their interests, and you have problems. Regulation is there, for example, on the imports. Companies import wheat and convert it to flour. Companies import maize and convert it to this and that. These are not the masses. They are just the end users. The government's responsibility there is to regulate and make sure that when they do, their process does not have negative consequences on the people, because what they're after is profit. And for instance now, it has become almost difficult, not impossible, to import some of these things because of the value of, our FX to Naira. And the masses or the lower level people in this country are the ones that are taking the hit, because these people will have to make their profit. And so they transfer the cost to the people of Nigeria. So what role is government playing at that level? It's a complicated process, because government does not have enough funding to subsidize that at that rate, because you're talking of giving dollar at a lower rate for them to get these raw materials locally here. And if government is going to push to produce wheat locally, a lot of those factors we analyzed earlier will now kick in. So I think it has to be a combination of teamwork between government. Government has to find a way to bring these people closer and to get them to invest more on local research, local production, rather than import.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program today and sharing your thoughts with us. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We've been speaking with the Director General, Sahelian Center for Leadership and Development, Dr. Ibrahim Bello Dauda. He is also the principal partner and CEO of PVG Consult Limited. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at the same discussion with another guest in the studio. Please stay with us.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television, and we're still discussing, similar issue, the issue of importation of goods into Nigeria. And we have a development economist, Dr. Emeka Ikengu, here in the studio to give us his own perspectives on the issue. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, now the guest that left here earlier, emphasized on the fact that the issue Nigeria has is between policy and implementation. Are you of that opinion as well?
Well, it's not at the heart of it. Okay, the issue is that we are not discussing Nigeria as a whole. All right.
Okay.
So you can't at the level of policy, you have what you might be able to call the Nigerian Agro or the Nigerian Agric or the Nigerian Infrastructure Development Program. But at the level of implementation, you now begin to see at all levels, both the national and the subnationals, a lot of silos. Okay, there is no synergy of what you might be able to call the two other P's, or the P and the A. Now, the second P is projects, and then the A, actions. Now, it is good enough that everybody has a thought, and that is what the policy is. Policy is actually your thought lines that you've aggregated into a legal document. Okay, you now give it a legal backing to say, okay, this is the way to go. Now, for you to say that this is the way to go does not mean you have gotten to where you're going to. That movement has to now be made possible by now what you call your program. Okay, and then your actions or projects that now support that program or actions. And I give you a very typical example. When we talk about agriculture, have you ever seen any national outputs that everybody has bought into? And when I'm talking about national outputs, is to be able to say everybody talks about 86 million hectares of land, okay, as our arable land in Nigeria. Does it belong to the federal government of Nigeria? In that 86 million hectares of land, you might just have less than 0.5% of it, accruing to the federal government or where the federal government has access. The rest of it are the subnationals and are the local governments. And at that level, do you also now have the state government saying that out of this 86 million, I have 20 million of it, and I'm going to be making certain that this 20 million now goes into building this national cohesion that can begin to now talk about our national outputs that ties to our silo systems and our strategic reserves. Am I making some sense to you? So this is where you now begin to see, this disconnect that is actually at the heart of the matter. So you see beautiful policies like UPLAB. You discuss, beautiful policies, how can't we implement? You can't implement when the government of a state government, it does not tie into your cowpea program.
So you are thinking more of the political dimension to the implementation of policies.
It's not political.
Right?
It is not political. It's the strategy. Okay? A political makes it still policy. It is at the level of policy that you have political will and all that and all that. I'm saying, listen, there are 212 million Nigerians. You want to feed them. You have 86 million hectares of land, okay, distributed amongst your 36 states and the FCT, right? Now, you have a federal Ministry of Agriculture and 36 ministries of agriculture. What is the synergy? Do they meet? Now, when they meet, do they present a common budget? Do they present a common program? Okay? Do they understand that the nation needs 300 million tubers of yam? Okay? And it's going to be coming from location A, B, C, D. And this is where we're going to be doing, harvesting, storage, transportation, value addition, and all that. That's not political. You understand? Now, this is where you now have what you might be able to call, if you may, an implementation strategy.
So, but if you talk in the sense of, subnationals, not necessarily buying into maybe the policies of federal government, right? Isn't it the work of politics to get, the subnationals to buy into whatever the agenda is, by the federal government?
There are two things here. Buy into my thought line, okay? It's my thought line, and then know that this is all about our national security. And again, one mistake people make is that they see food as agriculture. Food is actually security. And until you begin to treat food as security, because food security, food is actually a very major instrument of subjugation, if you may. All right? Whoever it is that controls your food, even at home, even for those of you who come from northern Nigeria, there's what you call the rumbu. Am I getting it right? And women are not allowed into the rumbu. So if you're not very, if your husband gets angry, am I making some sense to you? At that local level, you dare not go to the rumbu to go and get food. So you need to be calm.
Only the man holds the key.
It's only the one culturally allowed to climb in there. So it keeps you in the narrow. You need to be sober. And at the global level, I mean, we're talking about Nigerian food imports. Is it not surprising that the biggest food or import we make is wheat? Go and look at your statistics. And then you're talking about animal fats and all that, and oils. And then you have 86 million hectares of land. And the president himself, says that only 2.6, percent of it is in cultivation. And it's not even in right cultivation.
So what really is our problem?
Understanding what the problem is, like I've just tried to explain to you. So it's not a question of somebody who doesn't have access. What the federal government does, through the Ministry of Agriculture is to give the impression that they are in charge of these 86 million hectares of land, whereas that's not the truth. Do you understand what I'm saying? The land is in the hand of the state. So if you want to promote agriculture, okay, first and foremost, you must promote agriculture as what it is. A very major component of national security. In fact, the most important. Because
so in doing that, how do you do that? If, say, federal government does not necessarily have control, over these lands, they're in the hands of the subnationals. How does the federal government ensures that the subnationals, do what they need to do in terms of promoting agriculture at their level? For
everybody to know that all of us live in a local government, including the federal government. The president of Nigeria lives in Amak local government. That's where his official residence is. True? Okay? The governor of Kaduna lives in a local government in Kaduna. And is that not true? Ditto with every other governor in Nigeria. So it is all about that base level. And I'm talking about us simplifying it. And I tried to do so earlier, to say to you, let us now match numbers with demands. Okay? Now, every human being alive needs some volume of nutrition to be able to survive. And, well, food to survive, but nutrition to be able to grow well. So the moment you're able to now, identify what a child needs, a 5-year-old child, and that's why those of you who are women, you bring carrots, you bring this, you bring this, you bring this, you bring that, and then you're getting this mixture for your child. If that becomes the basic, I'm trying to make this very elementary, okay? And we now have 200 million people that you must give nutrition support. And in giving this nutrition support, you don't need to give these things to them in a raw form. From carrot, you can get extracts. From this, you can get this. From that, you can get this. This is where you now start building your food chain. But what is important is how are you going to get it? Okay? Again, there's been this argument of GMOs. And I say that GMO is the reason why you are getting all the wheat you're getting from America. It's not every GMO that is lab-based. Right. Okay? And then GMOs are actually supposed to now, make it a lot easier for you to produce even in the harshest of weathers. If you apply the GMO to probably your seedling and then your land preparation and all that. Okay? We're talking about genetically modified organisms here. That's what it is. So it's all about science. So you cannot remove science. Now you say you need science and technology to be able to promote increase it and all that. And you say, oh no, but in this science and technology, we're also not going to be adopting the GMO, which is actually at the heart, okay, of preparing your land. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you understand it well, the first thing we're talking about is, do we have land to produce? Now, if the answer is yes, do we have the technology to be able to now get the best yield out of that land? If the answer is yes, do we have the human capital to be able to get that thing done? If the answer is yes, Do we now have the support infrastructure to be able to now start doing your value processing? Okay, now these are the strategies. And in doing this, we'll now begin to now say, okay, let's assume you're Kaduna State, my brother. Let's assume you're Adamawa State. Okay, and I am Abia State. Okay, Adamawa, Abia, this. From our geospecifics, from our, you have X amount of land, by your weather, by your this, by your access to water, you can be able to produce this. So we are going to be supporting you to be bringing this, okay, onto that national whole. Now, you are talking about a national strategy, and it has nothing to do with politics. Do you understand? It has everything to do with the factors of production.
You know, we politicize everything in Nigeria.
Good luck to you guys. You know, because I'm trying to. This is a simple thing you need to do.
Yes, it sounds simple, you know, really, but you know, in the interview with the president, he made reference to land ownership and how it is a problem, especially in the southeastern part of the country and all of that, as you know, as a challenge, you know, to boost, you know, local production of food and all of that.
Well, you see, the greatest asset you have is land, and if you had land, it's just I don't know how much time I have. I would have told you if I can come to you, and I say to you, this is your plot of land, can actually earn you 2 million naira if I put in a cattle fattening facility here. You'll be very willing to give that land because you haven't sold it. So it is, again, what you ask people. And I am one of these proponents of saying, don't take anybody's land. Don't. What you need to do is to improve on that land and do shared prosperity. That's the simplest way to go. Okay? And that way, everybody begins to see value. So you might not have gone to school. You can now use that land, okay, to be able to make certain that your generations after you, okay, now are able to now move from whatever level you are into something else. You don't need to take my land.
Okay. Now, in your assessment, would you say Nigeria has achieved food security, or are we on our way there?
Nigeria is very food insecure. We are not even very close to understanding what it is. We are so food insecure that it is scary. It's very scary. The level of hunger. In fact, there's a report that says that about 400,000 children are going to be dying because of malnutrition. They would die because, I mean, it's almost too late to save them. And then with insecurity in the northeast zone, the numbers are even getting worse. So when you're talking about, are you going to achieve food security with a hoe and a knife? Is that how they're doing food insecurity? Well, what we're doing is we're not even doing farming as it were. We're doing gardening. We're just playing around, because even the people who are doing the farming, the farm outputs can't even feed them and their families. So
we should be talking about mechanized farming, which is, you know, part of the issues that the president says that they're going to be focusing on, you know, until the end of his administration, in terms of investing heavily in mechanized farming. How much of that do you think we're doing?
We need to invest heavily in understanding the cross-cutting issues. Mechanization is not at the back end. Mechanization is actually at the midstream. What is important is land delineation. And necessarily, you don't even need to, again, mechanization are of two kinds. Okay, mechanization vis-a-vis, and you see, each time people talk about mechanization, what comes to mind is tractorization. Okay, that's not the same thing. If you're talking about mechanization vis-a-vis technology and innovation, then we should be focusing on the Ministry of Science and Technology. That should be at the heart of now doing what you call technology driven. But you must be able to, each time you use the word mechanization, separate it clearly from tractorization. They are not the same thing. And tractorization has a lot of its own issues if you also don't understand it. Because if you bring in a tractor and you're doing anything less than 30 hectares of land, that tractor will wipe out whatever profits that farm can bring.
Okay. All right. Now, I want us to talk about this land issue, because It seemed to me like that's the angle that you seem to emphasize as a major challenge here. We have the federal government on one hand, we have the subnationals on the other hand. In what ways can the federal government engage the subnationals to ensure that we are on the same page? In what ways exactly?
Example, or simple again. You have 86 million hectares of land. That's not in contention. The question will be, where are they? Okay? Now, every state government is interested. Way back when I was younger, we didn't used to have plantations in Nigeria. We used to have belts. And if you follow those belts, the palm belt ran all the way from Enugu and ended and circled Cross River, the present-day Cross River. Same palm belt. And that was why Eastern Nigeria was able to take shiploads of palm oil, and they were able to start doing all those very mega infrastructures. In Northern Nigeria, you also didn't have even the granite. You had the granite belts. They were running all the way from Kano, and they were going towards Jigawa, okay, up to Yobe. And that was how you got all those pyramids of granite. And in fact, I can tell you now that I stand to be corrected. There is no public infrastructure in the whole of Northern Nigeria, okay, that is higher than the 10-story building in Kaduna, built with public funds in the past 30 years. And this was built by just granite. But it was built because there was volume that now could unlock value. Do you understand what I'm saying? There was this synergy of all these locations that were producing and aggregating. And it's still there with, even if you go to the Dawanau grain market today, okay, I think it's the biggest grain market in the whole of Africa or something, Dawanau in Kano. You need to go there. You will see, if you want 1 million bags of whatever grains, in 2 hours they load it out for you. Now, they are not all coming from Kano. And there is a link. Do you understand? There's a link between that market and those who are producing it. Everybody knows who the middle person is, who the farmer is, where they're aggregating. And then it's even how our urban areas, even our rail systems were being built. So the simple thing to do is, first and foremost, okay, Haji, you're a woman. You have 10 children. You wake up in the morning. You go and carry 1 cup of rice and go and put inside the fire. And after 10 minutes, you say, everybody come, the food is ready. Have you fed anybody?
No.
Okay, so the first thing you need to do in even talking about national food security is, how many people are you feeding? Okay, what do you require to be able to feed them? How long will it take for you to be able to produce, and how long can you be able to store? And when do you need to now replant or rebuy or restock? Is that not how you run your homes? It's that simple, my brother. So until we're able to have that conversation that is driven, okay, by proper statistics. All right? Now, the difference between a citizen and the masses is identity. Is that not so? So if everybody has an identity, if we're not planning against 300,000 people in Abuja, Abuja creates what you call the anchor economy, is either producing or is importing or is doing what? We now begin to build, like you had the relationship, I think they called it the Lake Rice, Lagos KB partnership, okay, if I'm right. Now, Lagos was supposed to be, you know, the primary off-takers. Kebbi was supposed to be, you know, the ones producing the rice. That's how the Lake Rice, you know, program came. Can you imagine that synergy? Now, I have land, you have markets. Can you beat that? So these are the kind of thinking that we must put into national development. If we don't do that, we are going to be singing to the choir. So if we talk about the Southeast people, you know, having land, yes, the land there has become very valuable because a lot of infrastructure is on the land. Okay, there barely any village you go in the southeast, you don't see one mansion, even in the thick of nowhere. Okay, and the moment you put that in and you're brought in, be it your own electricity, be it your own roads, now you now put value to that land. But I'm even saying that against that mansion, you can actually bring an agri project that can still beat the value of that mansion because it does not actually give him any money. It's a holiday home. We only go home in Christmas, stay there for 2 weeks, lock up the thing, and you need to do a lot of maintenance. Now, if that man, you have another land, okay, that you can be able to put some agro processor or something that will give that man more value than his mansion, trust me, he will give it to you.
Well, thank you so much. That's quite an interesting thought there.
Very different perspective from the
entirely
one
different perspective, actually. Talking about more of coordination, talking about more synergy, you know, among subnationals and areas that have, you know, more potentials to produce certain grains and, you know, that exchange and all that. Thank you so much. Well, we'll take a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll take, you know, concluding thoughts, you know, on this discussion. Please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story.
The World Bank has estimated that 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, experience some form of disabilities, and the prevalence is higher in developing countries. Meanwhile, the National Population Commission of Nigeria, NPC, estimated that no fewer than 19 million Nigerians are persons with disabilities. A larger percentage of these people in the country is living in poverty, and many of them, especially in the north, depend on street begging for livelihood. Notwithstanding, some of the PWDs are actively working on their own to earn a living. Born in Arowinde, Nafada local government, Gombe State, a 47-year-old Abdullahi Dalatu is among the few hardworking Nigerians with disabilities. Despite losing his sight at a tender age of 2, Dalatu is self-reliant. Since when he was 17, Dalatu has been a carpenter and a weaver, and this trade have been solving some of his family's problems. The 47-year-old said major threat to his business a lack of patronage and support from government and members of his community.
I once bought a stool, dismantled it and removed the nails. I used a saw to cut the wood, and by God's grace I reconstructed the stool.
Abubakar Yusuf is another person with disability. He also believes this ability is not inability. The entrepreneur is into shoemaking and already has 4 apprentices learning the trade in his workshop. The shoe engineer highlights some of his achievements in over 30 years of practice in the profession.
I'm grateful to God about this business. I have all my assets through this business. Before I was renting a shop, but now this shop is mine. I also got married and have 9 children. Some of them are in primary, secondary school and university. All I can say is praise the Almighty Allah.
The PWDs are now calling for support.
All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. In the studio, we have a development economist, Dr. Emeka Okengu, and he's been giving us perspectives about this recent contradiction. Now, earlier we told you that in the midst of huge investment in agriculture, the federal government said it spent $1.68 billion on food importation between January and September in 2011. So that's quite, contradictory if you look at, how much of investments that the government is making in the agricultural sector. We're still seeing, importation at that rate. And then we're trying to deconstruct exactly what's the problem. If we have such vast land in Nigeria and Africa, Nigeria specifically is blessed, and how come we are actually, suffering from this, food insecurity and the likes of it? Doctor, you have been talking to us about this, and the former guest talks about, policy implementation. You are taking us to another dimension of the issue, which is the lack of synergy and the lack of understanding of the magnitude of the problem that we are dealing with. So how well are we deconstructing, the need of the moment in terms of food shortage, and whether or not we are actually matching our responses, with the realities on ground?
Well, it's about data and statistics. Okay? How cogent is the data and statistics that we're using? Okay? How many in this expenditure we've done, how much of it have we done in scoping studies? A lot of the studies, a lot of what you want to read up on the agricultural sector of Nigeria will be studies paid for by FAO. They got the ones that engage consultants, develop these TORs for them, and then the people submit to them. To what extent have we been able to engage our own institutions to be able to also now carry out these scoping studies? And like I keep saying, it is all about getting what you call your baseline map. And then say to yourself, this is what I want to do over a period of time. But in doing this, these are the things I need to be able to do this. So when you're talking about policy, and I keep saying to you, if the president comes on TV, whatever thing he says, okay, is a policy thought line that you can develop upon. All right? Okay? The president says, I want every Nigerian to eat, to go to bed with a full tummy. It's a policy thought line. Now, it is for the people who are around him to now say, okay, what does the president mean by every Nigerian? It means that every 200 million persons in Nigeria must be able to eat. Now, for this to happen, we need to know where they are, what they are doing, okay, all right, and how they can get this food to eat. Am I making some sense? Now, this is where the challenge of integration comes and planning comes. You just don't go on air after that and then go and develop a national Every Nigerian Eat program and launch it. You're going to be throwing money or piecing it down the drain. It won't work. You must be able to have a war room. We want to be able to develop a national war room where we have, and this is where the National Planning Commission, okay, or Ministry of Finance now and Budget and National Planning can now be able to come into play. We should be able to now draw up this thing, and then against the people who can now be the factors. Who are those? I've just given you an example of the lake rice. Lagos has no land. Kebbi has a lot of land. Okay? But Lagos has the market. And Kebbi and Lagos have now done this collaboration. And they now have a product they call lake rice. LA representing Lagos, KE representing Kebbi. Okay, imagine if you had more of those things, where you had the same thing for beans, the same thing for this, the same thing for even cattle. I tell you this, a lot of people don't know this. The cattle economy, each time I have a chance to say this, cattle sales in Nigeria on a daily basis is 4 billion naira of first sale. I'm saying first sale. What do I mean by this? And it is only in one section of Nigeria because about 40,000 heads of cattle by statistics are slaughtered in the southern part of the country on a daily basis. Both of you are Northerners. Is there any way you can buy cattle for 100,000 now, even if it's a sick one? But I'm using 100,000 naira as my calculation. 100,000 times 40,000 gives you 4 billion every day. So imagine when you build a synergy between these people who are coming from the Sahel region. They are on forced migration, they don't have land, they don't have grass, and you're able to develop that kind of synergy, okay, between those who have this cattle and those who have the land and the markets. How you can begin to create social inclusion.
Okay, so is Nigeria really ready to cut down on importation of goods?
You can only be ready to cut down when you understand where you need to cut from. It's a question that has no answer, because it's beyond Nigeria. You're treating Nigeria as 3 of us sitting in this room. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's not a question you can answer very easily. And remember that what government is supposed to do is to actually superintend standards. And it's in superintending standards that you now create, these scenarios where people now find it a lot easier to grow at home than to start bringing in. A trader wants to maximize his profits. And that's what trade is all about.
Mm-hmm. All right, now talking about this synergy that you've talked about, you gave instance between the South, and the North in terms of production of cattle and all of that, cows and the rest of them. We've seen how that conversation has been marred by political interest. For instance, if you take a subject like the cattle grazing, it's something that has become controversial, and we see all sorts of narratives, given along ethnic lines. And in fact, in some places, like secessionist groups like IPOP, for instance, says they are banning, the eating of cows in the southeastern part of the country. When you see narratives like that, how does that have an implication on these efforts?
Okay, let's also discuss the narrative of the governor of Katsina State, that also came out and said he was banning cattle moving around. Let's also discuss the emir of Muri, that also he said you can't be walking around, with cattle all over and destroying people's crops. So, you see, I keep telling people this, that the greatest challenge you have is to give the mic, okay, to people who are inconsequential, and they're not understanding that it goes beyond them. Everywhere else in the world, cattle grazing is the way to go, put in reserves. That's why Nigeria has over 300 grazing reserves all over the country. Now, the challenge is now the movement from point A to point B, and making certain that in moving that cattle, you don't destroy people's livelihoods. Because what cattle is to you is what cassava is to some other person. It's important to have that understanding. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, what is important is that you must be able to be consensus in understanding. I just told you that a lot of these people who are carrying this cattle are carrying it on forced migration. They don't even know where they're going to. So if you don't have a program that treats both the man and his cattle as refugees, okay, who you must assist to a certain point. So the first thing we should have been talking about in dealing with this cattle is to be able to develop what you might be able to call cattle integrators, not ranches. Because those integrators would have allowed whoever it was that was running from whatever, banditry, insurrections, climate crisis, to be able to get somewhere you can be able to get a breather. Okay? Before you now start, again, somebody says to you, I ban cattle, I do this, I ban sheep. No, that's not how it's done. But again, it is their prerogative to be able to say it. Saying it and doing it are two different things. So, it's so easy for you to wake up and say, you know what I plan to do now? In fact, I'm going to march to the Chief of Army Staff and give him a very heavy slap. You can say it. Or that you're going to the bank and you've written a check, you want $1 billion. And that is why they use the word easier said
than done.
Okay, so I think we must, we must be able to promote our cohesiveness. We must be able to promote social inclusion. And in whatever it is, I am guided by facts, and I want to put them on the table.
So in that sense, do you think some of the interventions that we've seen by the federal government, on agriculture, like this Anchor Borers program, for instance, do you consider that as a sustainable kind of program to boost agricultural production?
Okay. Now, if I give you money, is it enough for you to be a successful farmer? Okay? If I give you seeds or seedlings, and you do not know, the soil properties of your land, would you get yield? So it is not enough for you to give loans, and you're not even giving this money, as equity. You're giving it as debt. So the man is more interested in using that money to go and buy from some other people who are importing and making money than putting it on the ground, knowing that his brother who borrowed lost it. Am I making some sense to you? So it's not about, money. And this is what I've been struggling to let us understand. It is about process. And the first process, like I said to you, begins with not only land identification, not only land delineation, but land investigation. It is not every land that grows everything. And then in doing this land investigation, it is then now you now begin to now look at the allied things you need, your water sources, your infrastructure for evacuation and all that. So we must be scientific, okay, in trying to approach. It's not a yes and no answer. Anchor Borers program, you throw money at 100. How many farmers are being chased around now to pay back the loans? You should be able to also do a program on it. You'll be shocked that over the receivers now, the repayments are less than 30%.
We actually have.
You have done it.
I've done that.
So it's over 80% of loss. Now, did you also now ask yourself why that happened? You have lost you have taken the money, you didn't get the yield, you're owing the banks, you can't get more. Do you now see that I've created more problems?
All right, well, thank you so much. We have to end the discussion here because of our time. We do appreciate your comment to the program, and we look forward to having you again.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. We've been speaking with development economist Dr. Emeka Okengu, and here giving us perspectives on the contradiction between investment and the rising importation that we are seeing of food items, and of course the issue of food insecurity in the country. Now with that, we wrap up the show for today. In case you've missed, you can catch up on our YouTube and also connect with us via our social media handles. My name is Ibelia.
And I'm Zainab Bala. Thank you for watching.
Bye.